bienvenue cette fin d'après-midi pour la réunion spéciale du 13 juillet 2023. Welcome to this meeting of July 13, 2023. Good afternoon. I'm going to need quelqu'un pour faire l'ouverture de la réunion. J'ai besoin d'un proposeur. M. Villot, M. Walker, on est tous en faveur. Merci beaucoup. On va passer maintenant à l'adaptation de l'ordre du jour. On va avoir besoin d'un proposeur, il y en a plusieurs. M. Cadieux, M. Villot, tous en faveur. Qu'il soit résolu que l'ordre du jour soit adopté tel que présenté. On va passer maintenant à la divulgation d'intérêts pécuniaires. J'arrive. Moi, je vais déclarer un conflit d'intérêts au numéro 6.5 d'entente avec M. Henri Laviolette. Est-ce qu'il y a d'autres? Non. On va passer maintenant à l'item 4, qui est un règlement sur les frais de redevances d'aménagement. Je ne sais pas si on a... Do we have Mr. Andrew Granda here somewhere? There we are. Mr. Andrew Granda, can you hear me? I don't think I can hear you for now, but...
We can hear you, Mr. Granda, but not very well. One sec.
Go ahead, sir. See if we can hear you now. Ah, c'est pas qu'on peut l'entendre, hein? Bear with us for a minute there. Mr. Granda is trying to get in touch with us right now.
Could you say something, please?
Est-ce que... OK. Ouais, ça se peut. Ouais, ça se peut. Fait que ça ne sera pas long. On a des petits problèmes techniques pour le moment. Ça fait que ça fait partie des détails. Ouais.
Mr. Granda is very quiet. I don't know if it's on your end.
Oh, it's very quiet. Let me try.
Oh, we can hear you now.
We can hear you now.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Great.
Well, welcome, Mr. Granda from Watson and Associates. So you have the floor, sir.
Great. Thank you very much. I apologize for the technical issues. The presentation that you see on the screen, the purpose of the meeting today is the statutory public meeting related to a development charges bylaw. The Act requires that a municipality, before passing a bylaw, must undertake a public meeting in accordance with the background study that's been made available to the public. The municipality's background study has been made available on the municipality's website for some time. We had a meeting with council to advise of the background study, and tonight forms the statutory public meeting for anyone in the public to ask any questions. As detailed in our background study, the background study demonstrates the methodology that has to be followed under the Development Charges Act, as you see on the screen, which considers the amount of development that's anticipated by the municipality over the forecast period and the associated increase in need for service as a result of that development, then determines the capital costs related to that increase in need for service to derive a development charge that would then be imposed and governed by the rules of the bylaw. In the DC background study, you'll see a detailed forecast of the anticipated development for both residential and non-residential growth. This growth forecast has been prepared consistent with the United Counties of Prescott and Russell Growth Management Strategy that was prepared in 2022 by Hemson Consulting. It identifies that over the 20-year forecast period, approximately 537 additional residential units would be constructed, and that would have an increase of about 856 additional population in the municipality over that period of time. So taking the existing population to just over about 10,500 persons by that point in time, about a 0.4% annual increase. Similarly, the employment jobs within the municipality are expected to increase by about 300 jobs, and that would require the construction of about 270,000 square feet of additional floor area to be able to accommodate that employment-related demand. So in light of that anticipated development, we had a number of meetings with municipal staff to determine the increase in need and the associated capital costs. As you can see summarized on this table and obviously in more detail in our background study, it identifies the specific needs related to roads and related public works, as well as additional fire protection services in the form of fire hall space and vehicles, additional recreational and park service implications for community-centered trails and parkland development, library service with additional collections being maintained to provide the same level of service for the future development as provided for the existing community, a provision for additional waste diversion requirements, and also in our addendum report had modified the earlier background study to be compliant with the recent changes in the Development Charges Act by removing the growth-related studies that are no longer eligible to be included under the development charge. As you'll see again in the background study, those calculations then produce the schedule of charges. When we look at the calculated schedule of charges for a single detached residential unit, the amended charge that is provided for would be a charge of $7,554 per single detached residential unit. By comparison to the municipality's current charges today of $3,951, that's an increase of about $3,600 per unit once the charges are fully in effect. For non-residential, similarly, an increase of about $1.14 a square foot for non-residential. It's about a 50% increase over the current charge of $2.29 per square foot. And as I mentioned, those are the charges that would be fully phased in over time, because with the amendments to the Development Charges Act, as a result of the More Homes Built Faster Act, these charges that have been calculated now have to be phased in over the first 5 years of the bylaw. And so as you can see on the screen, if we look at the charge for a single detached dwelling unit, that calculated charge of $7,554 would not come into effect until year 5 of the bylaw. The first year of the bylaw, only 80% of that amount would be eligible to be imposed. And so that would be a charge of $6,043 per unit. That represents about a little over 50% increase to the current charge for residential being imposed today. And similarly for non-residential, that charge for the first year would be $2.74, about a 20% increase over the current charges today. What you also see on the screen is that in the schedule of charges, if the development is for a different type of residential unit, such as an apartment or a condominium, depending on the number of bedrooms, or a townhouse, that the lower charge is applied based on those dwelling unit types, reflective of the occupancy in those types of development units and their demand for service. To provide some context for those charges, you can see we've included a few comparison of development charges in the surrounding area. The first table that you see is for a single detached residential unit, and it compares the development charges for all types of residential development charges. So to the extent that charges are imposed by upper tier, lower tier municipalities or education boards, those charges are reflected in this comparison. And so when we look at the current charge or the proposed charge for the first year of about $6,000, that would show that the municipality's charges would be approximately in the lower third of the comparators. That charge would be comparable to the charges that are currently imposed in the nation, and also a bit higher than that imposed in Hawkesbury, who currently imposes charges at about $4,600 per unit, but well below what we see in some of the more urbanized areas of the region. When we look at a non-residential charge imposed for commercial types of development, again, the first year charge of $2.74 a square foot would be comparable to the median of those municipalities surveyed. Again, comparable to that in Hawkesbury at about $2.15, a little bit below that in Renfrew at around $3 a square foot. Also, when you look at this table in comparison to the residential one we just looked at a moment ago, you'll see on the far right-hand side, there are a number of municipalities that do impose charges on residential, but exempt payment on non-residential developments. So Elizabethtown, Kitely, the Nation, for example, are municipalities that only impose DCs on residential development and exempt non-residential development, which is entirely within council's discretion to do so. However, that's a foregone revenue that, if not paid for by development charges, would have to be paid for by taxes or water sewer rates, for example. And we see a similar sort of trend when we look at industrial. Now looking at that charge that is calculated for the first year, the municipality's position would be closer to the lower end of those that impose them, but a little bit above the median of all municipalities surveyed. And that's reflective of the fact that a number of municipalities that are in this survey fully exempt industrial from the payment of development charges. So hopefully that provides some context for the charge and how it was determined and how it compares to not only its current rates that are imposed by the municipality, but also some charges in the surrounding area. In the background study, it also includes the policies or rules that would govern the imposition of the charge. We've summarized those in the following slides. So firstly, noting that the charges would be payable at the time of building permit issuance. As per the Development Charges Act, those charges are grandfathered in if under certain conditions of site plan or zoning bylaw amendment approvals. If building permits are issued within 2 years, then the charges imposed at the time that the application for the planning approval was taken would be applicable. Also, for charges of rental housing and institutional development, those charges are paid over a 6-year installment period. Also, there's a number of exemptions that have to be adhered to under the Development Charges Act. So these charges cannot be imposed on the municipality or a school board development in the municipality. Also, if there's intensification of an existing residential unit where it adds additional units in the building or ancillary to it, those would be exempt as well. Industrial expansions are exempt up to 50% of their existing floor area, as are universities and nonprofit housing and affordable housing once associated regulations come into effect. And finally, if there is purpose-built rental housing developed, the Act also provides discounts from the rates in the municipality's bylaw. Depending on the number of bedrooms, those discounts range between a 15% to 25% discount of your current charges. The discretionary exemptions that we've maintained in here are consistent with the municipality's existing bylaw, where if there was a farm building development, again, the first 50% of that or would be exempt from payment of development charges. Also, lands owned for hospitals, healthcare, or cemeteries would be exempt. Garden suites, temporary buildings would also be exempt, as would places of worship. And any development on land where a public facility is provided that's authorized by council would also be exempt from payment of development charges. And so those policies are maintained. And then the final two policies are one, to reflect the fact that new development can occur as a result of redevelopment of an existing site. And if redevelopment is occurring, there is a provision to provide a credit for what is being replaced, and only incremental development is charged, as long as that demolition or conversion happens within 5 years of the building permit being issued. And finally, the charges that are provided in the background study and in the draft bylaw are presented in current values today. The Act allows those charges to be indexed annually to maintain pace with capital cost inflation. And the bylaw provides a rule to have that index on January 1st of each year in accordance with the appropriate index. And so that concludes the presentation for the purposes of the public meeting. The next steps in this process would be to hear from the public, for council to make a determination if any further changes are required to the study or the bylaw before its adoption, and then ultimately for council to consider passing and adopting the bylaw to bring that into effect. And that concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I want to thank you for the great presentation. So I'm going to go to, do you have any questions or no questions whatsoever? So no? So listen, thank you. I want to thank you very much, sir, for your presentation. We have a bit of technical problems at first, but it doesn't matter. You did a great presentation, so I want to thank you again. You have a question, Mr. Walker?
I was just wondering if it's an opportunity to ask the public. Is this public here if they had any questions, or what the, if is that not the purpose of this meeting, for the public to ask questions? If there's any questions from the public, thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. Is there anyone that has questions? No? So I want to thank you again, and it seems like there's no questions. So thank you very much, sir.
Good. Thank you very much.
On va passer maintenant à l'item 5, direction générale, projet du plan stratégique. Je pense à ce moment-ci, je vais laisser la parole à notre directeur général, M. Potvin.
Merci, M. le maire. Donc, j'ai circulé une copie papier du plan stratégique. Si les gens veulent le consulter, il y en a des copies sur le coin de la table. Essentiellement, l'objectif ce soir, c'était d'obtenir une validation finale par le Conseil du projet de plan stratégique pour 2023-2026. Depuis le 18 mai dernier, on a eu plusieurs séances de travail avec le Conseil et avec l'équipe de gestion du canton qui a mené au développement du projet de plan stratégique 2023-2026 qui est devant vous. Donc, avec une mission, la vision et les valeurs corporatives. Et le plan comme tel qui inclut 4 axes stratégiques, chacun accompagné d'un énoncé global et de 3 stratégies. Donc, l'intention, c'est de partir avec cette version-ci pour aller consulter l'ensemble du personnel du canton ainsi que nos citoyens pour recevoir des commentaires pour présenter au Conseil lors de la rencontre de septembre prochain, dans le but de finaliser le processus, puis d'adopter la version finale du plan 23-26. Peut-être une petite note, vous avez mentionné, vous avez peut-être noté que c'est une version qui est écourtée. C'était le désir de certains membres du Conseil que la dernière version était peut-être un peu trop longue ou trop étoffée. Donc, il y aura un deuxième document qui sera présenté au Conseil, qui est le plan d'action pour la mise en œuvre. C'est dans ce document-là qu'on va recevoir ou qu'on va plutôt y voir des actions précises, donc les actions prioritaires que nous avions lors du plan 21-23. Donc ça va être retiré du plan comme tel, puis ça va être présenté dans un document à part qui va être un plan d'action pour la mise en œuvre. Donc, sujet à vos questions, Monsieur le maire, ça conclut mon rapport.
Merci, M. Potvin. Est-ce qu'on a des questions ou des commentaires sur... Je sais qu'on a passé plusieurs réunions, 2 ou 3 là-dessus, puis on a consulté plein de gens. Fait que s'il n'y a pas de questions pour le moment, on va en terminer. Oui, allez-y, M. Walker.
So I gather that, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I gather that in the acts, or this number 2, the environment, where we specifically talk about a forest protection bylaw, that is not in this one, but it's in the other one. Is that correct? Like you just said? Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. Go ahead, Mr. Potvin.
Merci, Monsieur le maire. You are absolutely correct, Mr. Walker. The action plan will include all the specific actions. This is just a global plan per se.
Thank you, Mr. Potvin. Mr. Walker, that answers the question. So if there's nothing else, we're going to go ahead and go to number 6, département de la réglementation. On passe au numéro 6.1, qui est demande d'exemption de règlement. Je m'excuse si je ne vois pas au micro de temps parce qu'il faut parler proche. Demande d'exemption de règlement de bruit, le numéro 2002-002-22, tournoi de Plantagenet. Je vais avoir besoin pour la discussion, je vais avoir besoin d'un proposeur puis un appuyeur pour discussion. M. Villot, M. Walker. Discussion, commentaire? Non? Sinon, on va passer à... Oui, allez-y, M. Villot.
On voit que... Merci, M. le maire. On voit que M. Gour a fait une demande, mais je suis juste curieux, le processus, est-ce que les voisins immédiats ont été avertis ou bien si...
Si je peux me permettre, M. le maire, non, il n'y a pas eu de consultation au niveau des voisins. C'est juste parce que le tournoi, le samedi, les dernières parties de balle se terminaient à 10h30. Alors, ils prévoyaient que ça se pouvait que ça déborde un peu plus tard qu'11h l'heure permise. C'était par mesure de précaution.
Merci beaucoup.
Merci, Mme Rochefort. M. Villot, ça répond à votre question, oui. Ça fait que je vais lire la résolution. Qu'il soit résolu que le Conseil accorde une exception au règlement sur le bruit de M. Samuel Gour jusqu'à minuit le samedi 12 août 2023 à l'occasion du tournoi de balle de Plantagenet. On est tous en accord? Merci beaucoup. Passez maintenant à l'item 6.2, qui est demande d'exemption au règlement au bruit, numéro 2002-22, 49 rue du Moulin, Alfred, Mme Lorraine Foucault. J'ai besoin d'un proposeur, un appuyeur pour discussion. M. Villot, M. Cadieux. Discussion, commentaire là-dessus? Non? Qu'il soit résolu que le Conseil accorde une exception au règlement sur le bruit de Mme Lorraine Foucault jusqu'à minuit le samedi 12 août 2023 à l'occasion de son mariage. On est tous en faveur? Merci beaucoup. Comme vous pouvez voir, je lis les résolutions parce qu'ils sont courtes à ce moment-ci. Ça fait que, on va aller à l'item 6.3, demande d'exemption au règlement sur les feux d'artifice numéro 2022-30, terrain de camping Cedar Shade, Mme Josée Pellado. J'ai besoin d'un proposeur, d'un appuyeur pour discussion. M. Villot, M. Walker. Est-ce qu'il y a des questions, des commentaires? Allez-y, M. Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So my question is simple, but I think it's been answered before the meeting that according to our fire chief, this is a safe thing to do. So if that's what he says, then I have no problems with it. I'd like a confirmation that that is what he has said. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Merci, M. Walker. Mme Rochefort.
Oui, merci, M. le maire. Pour répondre à votre question, M. Walker, le chef pompier a été consulté et c'est lui qui a soumis les recommandations qu'on a incluses dans les résolutions, qui sont entre autres que non, elles ne sont pas dangereuses, pas des risques d'incendie, que la problématique, si on veut dire, résulte surtout du fait qu'il faut récupérer les lanternes après. Alors, on a dit dans la résolution, si je peux me permettre d'élaborer, que la requérante soumette un plan du site pour indiquer l'endroit où elles seront relâchées, qu'une équipe soit formée et assignée à la surveillance ainsi qu'à la récupération des lanternes suivant l'événement, que la requérante obtienne un permis au même titre que si elle avait demandé pour faire des feux d'artifice et que l'événement soit annulé ou reporté dans le cas de vent violent. C'est la seule chose qui pourrait porter un risque.
Merci, Mme Rochefort. Ça répond à votre question, M. Walker? Ça fait qu'on est tous d'accord. Ceux en faveur? Contre? Non, c'est adopté. On va passer maintenant à l'item 6.4, exemption au règlement 2007-84 sur la garde des animaux. Mme Pearson et Mme Young, 2155 rue Joseph Lefebvre. Il y a un proposeur bien appuyeur pour la discussion, M. Walker, M. Cadieux. Discussion, commentaire? Allez-y, je vais demander à Mme Rochefort de lire la résolution, s'il vous plaît.
Be it resolved that further to recommendations from a doctor, an exemption to the Animal Control Bylaw number 2007-84, Section 4D, be granted to Mr. Pearson and Mrs. Young to allow 4 dogs for medical reasons, subject to the condition that in the eventuality that one of the dogs dies, they limit the total number of dogs to a maximum of 3 dogs in accordance to the bylaw.
On est tous en faveur? Oui. Merci beaucoup. Maintenant, l'item 6.5. Moi, je suis en conflit d'intérêts ici. Est-ce que je dois me retirer à ce moment-ci? Ou...
S'il vous plaît.
Oui. Okay. Fait que...
Alors, merci. Au point 6.5, l'entente avec M. Henri Laviolette. Est-ce que je peux passer la parole à M. Potvin ou Mme la greffière? Merci.
Bonsoir, merci, M. le maire suppléant. Alors, il suffit tout simplement d'entériner publiquement la décision qui avait été prise par les membres du Conseil lors de la réunion à huis clos du 6 juin. Alors, si vous me permettez, je peux lire la résolution pour votre... Alors, attendu que Henri Laviolette, Louise Laviolette et Sébastien Laviolette sont propriétaires du 3700 chemin Carrière à Alfred, en Ontario, et attendu qu'un différend perdure depuis quelques années entre les propriétaires et la corporation du canton d'Alfred et Plantagenet en lien avec les ajustements aux taxes foncières à la suite du retrait d'une tour de télécommunication de la propriété et des changements subséquents à la catégorie d'imposition de la dite parcelle, et attendu que le Conseil estime qu'il est dans l'intérêt de la municipalité de régler ce différend. Qu'il soit résolu que le Conseil de la Corporation du canton d'Alfred et Plantagenet accepte de verser une subvention de 8 676,44 $ aux propriétaires, conformément au paragraphe 107.1 de la Loi sur la municipalité de l'Ontario. Qu'il soit également résolu que les propriétaires verseront la somme de 8 676,44 $ à la Corporation du canton d'Alfred et Plantagenet à titre de règlement final, et qu'il soit enfin résolu que l'administration soit autorisée, sur réception du paiement ci-haut mentionné, à ajuster le solde du compte de taxes foncières à 0 pour la dite propriété.
Merci, Mme la greffière. Alors, est-ce que vous avez une question, M. Cadieux? Proposé par M. Cadieux, secondé par M. Walker. Merci. Tout le monde est en accord. Point 7, c'est la clôture. J'aurais besoin d'un proposeur. M. Walker, M. Cadieux. Merci beaucoup. Alors, c'est la clôture de la réunion à 4h58.